So good morning everyone, my name's Anya O'Connor and I'm a nutrition scientist working at the British Nutrition Foundation. And I'm going to speak to you about a group of foods that are important in a healthy varied diet. And this group of foods is known as bread, rice, potatoes, pasta and other starchy foods. So during this presentation we're going to learn about why do we need foods from this food group, which type of foods are the best to choose, how much we should eat, and also some top tips to boost your intake of these foods. So it all starts out with a healthy, varied diet, which is key for health. As you can see here, this is a picture of the Eatwell plate, and this is the UK's Healthy Eating Guide, which sets out the types and proportions of foods which make up a healthy, varied diet. As you can see, it's divided into 5 groups: fruit and vegetables, bread, rice, potatoes, pasta and other starchy foods, meat, fish, egg, beans and other non-dairy sources of protein, milk and dairy foods, and foods and drink high in fat and sugar. As you can see here, around a third of the foods that we eat should be coming from this food group. And it's recommended that half of our energy intake is provided by carbohydrate foods. So what's in this food group and what counts towards foods in this food group? So this food group is sometimes referred to as starchy carbohydrates and includes breads, breakfast cereals, pasta, rice, oats, noodles, maize, millet and cornmeal, couscous, potatoes, yams, plantains and sweet potato. Taking on board what I've shown you in the previous slides, which of these foods don't belong to this food group? So we have porridge, carrots, a bread roll, potato, breakfast cereal and pear. Can you now choose the odd foods out in this group? Carrots and pear are the odd foods out, as these belong to the fruit and vegetables food group. So why should we be eating starchy foods? Why should a third of our food intake be coming from foods from this food group? Well, it's because of the important nutrients that are provided by this food group. So some of the nutrients it provides is a key macronutrient known as carbohydrate, mainly in the form of starch. And carbohydrate is the preferred energy source for our body, and some organs, for example the brain, completely rely on glucose as a fuel. And we know that we need energy to keep our heart beating and organs functioning, for the brain, maintenance of body temperature, muscle contraction and growth, and also for your daily activities, be this playing sports in school or concentrating in school. Another key nutrient it provides is fibre, which is important for a healthy digestive system. Other nutrients that foods in this food group provide include a number of micronutrients. So it provides B vitamins such as thiamine and niacin and folate, as well as vitamin C and some key minerals also. So thiamine and niacin are important for the release of energy from food, for normal functioning of the nervous system, muscles and skin. And folate is key for the formation of healthy red blood cells, which carry oxygen around the body, as well as for the development of the nervous system. It also provides vitamin C, which is coming mainly from potatoes in this food group, and vitamin C is needed for healthy skin and body tissues, and also to help us absorb iron. Minerals provided by this food group include calcium and iron, and calcium is important for healthy bones and teeth, which we know is a key nutrient at periods of growth, for example during childhood and adolescence, and iron is key for healthy red blood cells. So some intakes of these nutrients are known to be low in groups of the population, for example calcium and iron in girls aged 11 to 18 years. So overall, foods from this food group can make a valuable contribution to the intake of these nutrients. And just to note that some of these nutrients are provided through the fortification of bread and breakfast cereals. So now looking at more closely about dietary fibre. Dietary fibre is a variety of carbohydrate found exclusively in plants, and we know that there are many different types of fibre. Some types of fibre can resist digestion in the large intestine and pass through the gut, and food sources of this type of fibre include wholemeal bread, wholemeal pasta and high fibre breakfast cereals. Other types of fibre can be partially digested, and these types of fibre can be found in foods such as porridge oats. The functions of fibre in the body are quite varied, again depending on the type of fibre. So some can be important for healthy bowel function and prevent constipation, whereas others can have a key role in reducing a type of lipid in our blood known as cholesterol, and high cholesterol levels in the blood have been linked to heart disease. And this type of fibre that has this effect is known as beta-glucan, which can be found in porridge. When thinking about the foods in this food group, it's important that we would choose whole grain or wholemeal varieties where possible. And when I refer to whole grain, I'm talking about that it contains 100% of the kernel of the grain, such as wheat. As you can see in this diagram here, this includes the bran, the germ and the endosperm. And the reason why it's recommended that we should eat and choose the whole grain or wholemeal varieties is because of the fibre content, which remains intact here in this bran layer. So try and include whole grain or wholemeal varieties where possible. For example, whole grain breakfast cereals or wholemeal bread, which are high in dietary fibre. Brown rice, potatoes and even popcorn can provide us with fibre. But how do we know when we're out shopping in the supermarket, how can we choose foods that are whole grain or wholemeal varieties? Well, here are some tips to help you to choose whole grain foods. So what we can do is we can look at the back of pack on food products, specifically looking at the ingredient list, and just look out for some words such as whole grain or whole wheat flour. And you can also look at the fibre as well on the nutrition label, so we know if a food product provides us with 3 grams of fibre per 100 gram, it is considered a source of fibre. And if it provides us with 6 grams of fibre per 100 gram, it's considered to be high in fibre. So now another question for you. We have 3 foods here: a medium slice of wholemeal bread, a medium bowl of porridge and a portion of white rice. Can you now rank these foods according to their highest fibre content per average portion? So the wholemeal bread, porridge and white rice. So we know that 1 slice of wholemeal bread provides us with about 1.8 grams of fibre. A medium bowl of porridge provides us with around 1.4 grams of fibre, whereas a portion of rice, white rice, provides us with around 0.8 grams of fibre. So how much of the foods in this food group should we be eating? In fact, we should be including one of these food groups at each meal occasion, and this can quite easily be done in a day. For example, if you think of your breakfast time, you could have a high fibre breakfast cereal or perhaps some toasted wholemeal bread. For your lunch, you could have a wholemeal sandwich, and for your dinner you could have, for example, as shown here, spaghetti with tomato sauce. So it's really quite easy to include these foods at each meal time. And why not, for example, have a jacket potato at lunch and also eat the skin of the potato, which will boost your fibre intake. And now moving on, I have a few questions for you on some common myths or facts about starchy foods. The first common myth or fact is carbohydrates are fattening and therefore starchy foods should be avoided. Do you think this is a myth or a fact? It is a myth. It is often assumed that carbohydrates are more fattening than fat. However, this is not the case as shown in this graph here. For every gram of carbohydrate, you get 4 kilocalories, whereas for fat, for every gram of that, you get more than twice the amount of calories, getting in total 9 kilocalories per gram. Overall, we know that if you consume more energy in the food and drinks that we eat than what we use in our everyday activities or exercise that we're doing, you will put weight on over time. And the starchy foods in our diet, they don't just provide us with energy, they're also providing us with other nutrients that I've mentioned already that are important for health. Myth or fact? Brown bread contains more fibre than white bread. Yes, this is a fact. Brown bread does contain more fibre than white bread. So 2 slices of white bread provides us with around a gram of fibre, whereas 2 slices of wholemeal bread actually provides us with 3.6 grams of fibre. However, because we know that white bread is the most commonly consumed type of bread in the UK, over brown and wholemeal bread, it actually still provides us with 10% of our daily fibre intake a day. Myth or fact? Products made from white flour are not healthy. This is a myth. So we know in the UK, in the production of white flour, some nutrients are removed. However, by law, the nutrients removed, calcium, iron, thiamine and niacin, must be added back, and they contain and can contribute to intakes of these nutrients. Also, as I mentioned earlier, it's because we consume more white bread than wholemeal or brown bread. And according to a government nutrition survey known as the National Diet and Nutrition Survey, bread provides us with more than 10% of our daily intake of protein, folate, iron, and around a fifth or more of our fibre and calcium intakes. What would happen if you were to reduce or omit starchy foods from the diet? So avoiding bread and other starchy foods altogether can lead to low intakes of fibre and important nutrients such as calcium and iron. So we know that intakes of these nutrients, for example fibre, calcium and iron, are low in certain groups of the population. So it's really not advisable that people should be cutting out this food group from their diet. So how can we boost intake of these starchy foods? Ways to do this would be to base your meals around foods from this food group, where possible to eat more whole grain or wholemeal varieties, for example breads, bagels, pastas, chapatis, tortillas and breakfast cereals. And just try and be adventurous. So you can try different types of grains, for example, a rye bread over wheat bread. Try different types of bread, such as seeded, whole grain or granary. You could also try wholemeal pasta instead of regular pasta, and have more rice and pasta and less sauce when you can. Some tips when cooking these foods. So it's can happen that some people can increase their calorie intake with these foods by adding fat. For example, if you think of having boiled potatoes and adding some butter to them. So try to avoid adding too much, if any, fat to these foods. But you could use lower fat spreads on bread or lower fat milk on cereals. In terms of cooking methods, you could try baking or boiling potatoes and bake chips rather than frying them, or choose low-fat oven chips over fried chips. So just to sum up the presentation, around a third of our diet should be provided from foods from the bread, rice, potatoes, pasta and other starchy foods food group. You should try to include foods from this food group at each meal, and where possible choose the whole grain or wholemeal varieties, as foods from this food group are an important source of nutrients for our health. So why not track your own progress with this food group? You could make your own chart to track how many foods from this food group you eat at each meal in a week, and then add a star to the chart when you eat whole grain or wholemeal varieties. So if you'd like further information on the Healthy Eating Week, please visit this link. Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions for you, Anya, if that's all right.
Sure.
To fire away at you. I was just wondering if you would be able to tell me what the difference is between whole grain and wholemeal foods.
People often wonder what the difference is between whole grain foods like multigrain bread and wholemeal foods like wholemeal bread and rye bread. Both foods contain all the components of the grain. Wholemeal foods simply contain whole grains that have been milled to a finer texture. In other words, wholemeal foods are also whole grain.
So they're one and the same?
So they're essentially, yes, they are.
Thanks very much. And another question for you, just before we finish the session today. I was just wondering about potatoes, yams and plankton and sweet potato. Why do they fall into this particular food group?
So they fall into this particular food group because they are essentially starchy carbohydrates, and that's why they come into this food group.
So it's a nutrient composition that dictates.
Exactly, yes. So it's because it's mostly made up of starch, whilst it has other nutrients as well. Because predominantly starch, it falls into this food group.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for your time today.